What makes me fearless is that my fear is not going to stop me.
When you're really confident, it's almost like you don't think.
Hi everyone, welcome to Think About It with me, Victoria Azarenka. Today, I'm so excited to introduce to you Trevor Moawad. He is a well-renowned mental conditioning expert and strategic advisor to the world's top athletes. Obviously, we had a lot to relate to, and I think you will find a lot of information about my own mindset and what it takes to be a professional athlete. This episode really inspired me to incorporate a new way of mental training for myself. Trevor, thank you so much for being here. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, Vika, it's really a great opportunity always to spend time with people, I think, in any field that have made it to the top. So the opportunity for us to spend some time today and join this really killer new show is very exciting for me.
I'm happy to have you here. So let's start off. I know you're in Manhattan Beach right now. Why don't you tell me a little bit, where did you grow up? How did you come about into pretty specific field, working with a lot of athletes through brain training, mental training?
It was really interesting. You know, I grew up in a coaching environment. My mother was a teacher, and so was my father. And in the mid 70s, my dad left the teaching and coaching field, and he was teaching English and math and coaching basketball. And in addition, he was teaching these classes called pep talks, personal enrichment principles, and helping people sort of get out of their own way. And you know, the sports world teaches you how to work with other people, how to compete, how to perform at a high level. So being a very successful coach prepared him psychologically, you know, to put a system in place that people really liked it. And about 5 of these coaches left teaching and actually formed a business helping people get the most out of their minds. So when I was raised, my dad was not a coach anymore. He traveled around the world teaching people how to get the most out of their mind. So I got a seminar, Vika, every night at dinner. I was kind of like a lab rat. It was an interesting way to grow up, that's for sure, with a father that was a full-time teacher of training the mind.
Yeah, hearing you talk about this, I grew up in a very different environment. You know, I grew up in Belarus, where brain training when I was growing up wasn't anywhere even really talked about. I feel like probably when you grew up, you were around it so much, so it was in a way normal for you to have that knowledge. But I still feel like people around were just, you know, like not that convinced about it. And now there's all this training methods, there's applications, there's devices for brain training. Looking back into my childhood, I wish I had that maybe knowledge, but at the same time, would I be here kind of looking for this knowledge more and willing to learn more about, you know, mental health, mental training, even though I'm already pretty far in my career, but I still feel that those skill set is just so valuable for anything you do in your life.
I really felt like I grew up with the fundamentals. And you have what, a 4-year-old son?
He's 3.5, yes.
Yeah, 3.5. So I think as we talk more, what I really wanted to do in the book was give sort of the same fundamentals that I got, but they weren't hard. And they weren't, I didn't have to do them. Ultimately, it's crazy that I went into the same field, but I didn't intern with my dad. I went to his, you know, speaking events, and he coached me. I think the number one thing that when I think back to my father, he wanted me to be capable when I got sick and had to drop out of college, that I could handle that. When I had success and things were going well in my life, that I could handle it. When I went through divorce, that I could handle it. I think what he wanted me to have was the skill set more than become that as a job. And it just happened that as I really couldn't make it as a pro soccer player and I went into teaching, I didn't like teaching history as much as I liked teaching sports psychology.
You know, my goal as a parent is to be able to help my son to create that foundation of things that I've learned. And part of why I'm doing the show is that I can acquire even more skill. When you were younger, you obviously have a certain influence, certain way of living at your house, but you have to step out of that world and you go into the world of a lot of negativity. You know, being a kid, I remember my high school, it was really tough. It was really tough, but I was a tough kid. I grew up in, around boys. I grew up really tough. So I knew how to shield myself, how to protect myself, but I often felt like bad for other kids who weren't maybe as strong mentally as I was. So how was that for you to go out in the world and face a little bit of a different reality, I would say, sometimes?
One of the qualities I think really helps the best athletes that I've seen is when you can take the judgment out. So many of us, Vika, are defined by who we think we're not. Well, you know what? Maria's got this, and Mary's got that, and Venus has this. And then, so many athletes, male or female, measure themselves by what they think they're not. And I think somehow in the process when I was raised, I was able to focus on what I had. All right, I might be 5'11", I may not be as athletic, but I'm going to use the gifts I have and be confident in that. I'm okay that I'm at a school where everybody's more intelligent than me. It takes them 30 minutes. It takes me 3 hours. That's all right. I'll put the 3 hours in. And I learned how to accept myself for the strengths I had and not judge myself for the weaknesses, but adapt. And that, however I learned that, and I do believe wellness, or, Russell Wilson and I are really pushing to develop academic curriculums that have these fundamentals, not the hard part, like meditation or things like that, but learning the power of language, learning the power of my own influence. What I'm most proud of myself is I constantly put myself in stressful environments that were way above my pay grade. That stress was a good thing for me because I was always around people that were better.
When you talk there, I keep writing little notes down because I feel like when you're talking about, constantly challenging yourself, like swimming in the deep end. And I was just talking yesterday to someone about, they were asking me about a junior girl, like she's, 14 years old, kind of like a little bit afraid to go into the next step. And he was asking me like, how was your mindset when you were 14? Like, what were you thinking? And looking back, I think what was different from the area, for example, where I grew up, which tennis was absolutely not popular. I was really kind of trailblazing my way. What I realized, I always played a year above me. I always played with somebody better. Even though I was losing, I was trying to go for more. I was never a kid who was looping the balls and staying there for hours. I was the one who was running in and trying to take a swing volley, and it was going to the net, it was going to the fence, but that was like something that I was going to do. And what was interesting part that I don't really know how to explain, but when I was starting to play, I was 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. We lived in a very, very small apartment, and I remember it like it was yesterday. We had a living room, which was a bedroom as well. And we had this carpet, which was shaped like a tennis court, kind of. So there was a service line, there was a baseline, and it was a square. And we had a couch and two like shelves, bookshelves. So it was like a net for me, and I had little racket and the sponge balls, and I played there. And I played that for hours. I played against the wall for hours. And I imagined myself playing in the biggest tournaments. I always played against Steffi Graf because she was my favorite player. So my imagination ran so wild, and I can't explain where I got it from. Nobody has taught me that. In my family, it wasn't such thing. Nobody really like played sport or was like, you know what, you should try to visualize something, or like it was coming so natural from subconscious or whatever. But I feel that really like was taking me to places, to like safe places that was building my inner confidence. And as I said, like, it's so hard for me to explain that. But one thing that I wanted to also point out, when you were saying that you were trying to do those different things, and since your dad was, very, very positive in a way, where I feel like a lot of kids sometimes face, like, especially in sports, where their parents try to live through their kids, their own dreams. There's a lot of negativity, so it's kind of hard to build that confidence, like, oh, you lost, or you didn't do well, or you had a bad grade, or you had to do this. It feels like you had that kind of an extra push, like going into the direction what you want. And what is the first thing that you, first of all, evaluate with athletes? What is, do you listen more, or do you talk more in the beginning? What is the process that kind of start the ball rolling? Because from what I'm understanding, it's been a long process for you to go to a place where people are like, oh, you know what? Let me listen to Trevor, what he's saying. Because you had to convince a lot of people and prove with the result after result after result that these things work. And, people are catching up, and it is very undeveloped. You had to convince and restructure so much for people to even understand why are you here? It's like, why are you here? I mean, we've done our fitness, we're maybe already got a nutritionist, so we already progressive, and now you got us talking to somebody who about what?
Well, great questions. I think first of all, to go back to what you were talking about, when you're in that apartment in Belarus, and you're reliving, these tennis matches, and you're playing against Steffi, and you're battling, what's happening is this psychological process called imprinting. And as you're experiencing that, your body's reliving it, and it can't tell the difference between this imagination and what's real. And that's really the power that the mind can have when you vividly imagine an experience. As you were doing that, it was creating this muscle memory that would later on be preparing you, obviously, to win multiple Australian Open titles. And I mean, it all interconnects, and sometimes, we're programmed, kind of like Serena said, her dad told her so often that she was going to be a world champion that she just figured she would, and then others, we get there our own way. To answer your first question, I had such a great opportunity, I think, Vika, for trial and error. There was only 3 of us in the sports psychology department in 2000. And, the academy was like the wild, wild west. I think from a skill set, when I would do the individuals, we did a lot of videotaping, where we would film the male or female athlete without any perspective, but just watching their body language, watching all their routines, watching all the things they went to. We would chart a lot of matches. So as somebody was playing a set, we would chart, all their points, so you could see if somebody lost 2 or 3 in a row, if it could spike to 8 or 9. And a lot of this stuff we're kind of making up, and then we'd come back in, we'd watch, we'd have a conversation, we'd talk about the body language, we talk about the plan. What does a coach see? What do you see? When you watch yourself, what do you want to accomplish? But a lot of just very practical, why aren't you there? What do you really want? Guys like studying, and women like studying other athletes that have been successful. Can I consolidate the best parts of Steffi Graf, of Andre Agassi, of Michael Johnson, of Lance Armstrong, and then put all these clips together where they're all saying the same thing about their path to success or how they deal with failure, so I could get athletes in to listen to that, and they responded. And then we could talk about, is it the gifts they have, or is it what they did before the gifts took off? When I form a habit, that habit forms me. That's not complicated, good or bad. Negativity is a real problem. And it's way more of a problem to get people to be less negative than to get people to be more positive.
Being positive, to me, from where I am from, the where I kind of grew up, is a little bit comical, kind of going back to where you started. Is like, oh, I'm gonna say a beautiful day and a beautiful day, and everybody, like, even when you try to like kind of go there, sometimes you get hit, like, get back to reality, right? Get back to reality. You're here. This is what it is. It's like kind of destroying your positive, thinking. And I've had personally like harder way to understand, like, when things suck, like literally suck, like how do you just, oh yeah, everything is going to be fine. You want to be optimistic, right? And I'm religious. I have faith. So I do believe in that component, but at the same time, I'm also a realist, where like I gotta act somehow. I'm not gonna just sit here and hope. For me, it was always kind of just like cringy in a way, a little bit, just positive. Like, it's not, because you have different emotions, and then you hear, oh, you have to accept your emotions. So there's a lot of like, which way do I go? Am I positive? But I have to still accept my negative emotions. Like, where do I go? So it fascinated me, the neutrality of what you were talking about. How do you kind of start? Because from what I've understood, and I saw you talk with Russell a little bit about it, is staying in the moment and kind of enjoying, not necessarily enjoying, but being in the moment and looking at what you can do in that moment. So,
first of all, this is why I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity, WTA, to have this conversation, because listen to sort of the confusion or how you understand. You're one of the best athletes in the world. You've been number one in the world. You've won multiple Grand Slams, and yet even trying to explain what positive is it cringe? It's all over the place. Vig, I think it's really powerful, kind of what you said, because negativity is 70 times more powerful than positivity. Positive thinking really struggles in the world. What it tries to get you to do is, as a bad event happens, okay, it tries to get you to move from that event immediately, as if it didn't happen, to seeing a brighter, better future instantaneously. Mm-hmm. When for many people, particularly in 2020 right now, who are furloughed, who are struggling to get jobs, who are looking at different things, it's really challenging to see the bright future.
Like sort of a denial, right? Like a denial that thing didn't happen, so I'm just gonna find another.
People think it's a denial, that it's the right concept. You know what I mean? Like, but it's too fast. Mm-hmm. Like, you just lost 6-0. You got smashed in the set. Like, you have to be able to step back and say, I just got my ass kicked. Like, that's real. Yeah. Okay. But the problem, like you said, a lot of people like are telling you in Belarus, or telling you like, hey, you need to get back to reality. The problem is, most people's reality is negativity. Mm-hmm. And what negativity does is the exact opposite of positivity, where it says, this is bad and it's going to stay bad. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it automatically goes in, you got your butt kicked, and that's how the rest of the set's going to look. Mm-hmm. That's how, and so what neutral does is basically say, this is good or this is bad, but either way, it's real. Okay. I lost my job. I lost the set. I lost my marriage. My marriage is great. I won a Grand Slam, whatever. It goes to the truth, but it says what's going to happen next is going to be based on what Vika Azarenka does, not what happened or how she feels about the future. And so for athletes, when they go to a neutral place, they can say, all right, this is real, but I can influence what happens next if I do something different, for better or for worse. And so, like, if I have a bad first half of a game, I know in my mind that happened. So I immediately go to a neutral behavior. What can I do differently, whether I'm up big or I'm losing big, to influence this? Mm-hmm. I went through, like I mentioned, I went through a divorce. This sucks. I miss her. This was, I love this relationship. But what I'm not going to do is if I spend 30 minutes on someone's Facebook, it takes an extra 2 weeks for me to move past it. So by not going to the Facebook page, by not dwelling on some of those things, I'm allowing myself to move forward, but I'm not pretending that I don't feel the pain. But I'm eliminating what I'm doing going forward that's going to make the pain worse. And so neutral is kind of, think of your car. You got a Ford Bronco. It's going backwards. What the world tells you sometimes, a coach, be positive. You can't go backwards to forwards. So that's where I think athletes accept it. They like the idea of being neutral. And I think neutral is also language. It's like you're down. It's a matter of like, like Serena used to say, like accelerate the racket head, stay forward, just behaviors you can do, whether you're, up 4-1 or down 1-4.
It makes a lot of sense. When you do get into the, for example, you lost a match or you lost a set and you are going into that reality. Look, this is what just happened. So you're kind of analyzing, right? You're going into the mode of analyzing, and you have to prepare yourself what you're going to do next. So you do set up an intention of what you're going to do, your action. So when you do that, how do you keep that neutral? Because in my mind, you want to be more on, positive side, more motivating side. If you want to do, because you want to do better, your actions, because the actions that you want to do, you're thinking of, this is what I want to do to get success, right? So it's going into the direction where it's, to me, kind of shifts into a positivity. So how do you describe that neutral approach with an intention of doing better?
You are shifting, but you're not shifting. You're going to the truth. So the truth is critical, and you're taking the judgment out. There is some positivity. If you remove negativity, then you can be positive. The problem is if you're trying to be positive at the same time as negative, and negative so much more powerful. I mean, think of American politics today. A negative message versus a positive message has no chance, right? All the negative noise is all you hear. So, ultimately it's a matter of like, all right, so let's take American football. I threw the ball to the wrong team 4 times, an interception. What's the truth? Okay. First time I'm leaning back, so my technique's form, I throw the ball too high. Second time, the player I'm throwing to runs the wrong route. Third time, my feet weren't planted. Fourth time, I got nervous and rushed it. All right, so if I keep my feet here, follow through better, communicate better with him, then I'll be fine because I'm evaluating it objectively. Now neutral is not emotionless. I'm intense, I'm emotion, I'm come on like that, but I'm not emotional. I'm not emotional because then then all of a sudden I'm starting to see red. And I know that because you can't do what you did in the moments that you did without going to, this is what I need to do to close this match. And I mean, how did you close some of those big matches? Were you focused like on your changeover? Were you focused on, this is what I need to do? Or was it more, I just got to find a way to win? Or was it more specific? I'm asking you.
A lot of times, I think it also depends sometimes on your emotional state. When you're really confident, it's almost like you don't think. It's like everything is very quiet, and it's like, I know what I gotta do. I don't necessarily think what I have to do. Like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna trust my body. And I've done that before. I know how to do it. This is what sometimes it felt also like you kind of got to talk yourself into it a little bit. Like, okay, you know how to do it. Just remember that. Like, try that. Go through that. Yeah.
Remember what are the specifics that you're doing when you are in that moment where you're closing a match?
Well, for me, there were 2 things that when I was down and I knew I had to get back, it's like I had this, always I kept telling myself, like, if you have one more point, you have a chance to make a difference. So no matter what it is, you just have to try. You just have one more chance, at least one more chance to make a difference. And it may work, may not work. But that helped me through some match points down to kind of get that mentality. The other thing was going through and taking your chance, because at the high level, nobody's gonna give you something. You have to go and earn it. So when you have to close the match, you put yourself in this mindset. You have to go take it, and you gotta trust everything that you've learned. You gotta trust yourself. You gotta hype up yourself sometimes to be more brave to do this. But this was to me more like, you have to take that chance. And all the matches that I've lost was I didn't take the chance and my opponent did. I didn't go for enough. And sometimes I felt that it was better to go for maybe too much, because you feel a little bit less of, I sort of regret in the moment, like, oh, I should have taken, rather than, just not taking that chance. So those were the two things for me that made a big difference.
I'm getting better today. So thank you for the time that you're spending with me, because this is an opportunity for me where I'm at somebody at another level from me, clearly athletically, and in your experience. So it's going to pull me up. So I appreciate that. And one of the things I learned from the great Olympic sprinter, Michael Johnson, who from 89 to 2000 was #1 in the world and kind of was famously wore the gold shoes.
I know him very well. I actually went to his center and I did some of my testing there. I've had a pleasure talking to Michael. He was very inspirational.
But isn't he one of those guys, Vika, where you would say, whether he ran or not, like whatever he did, you could tell he would be good at it?
Yeah. I mean, right even now, I remember watching him perform, and then meeting him was a surreal feeling. But I remember those races that they were so short, but the anticipation for it and the excitement before, and it was always super cool.
Yeah, and last year he had a stroke, and all the same things that he did to make himself #1 in the world, he worked himself back in 7 weeks and completely recovered from not being able to walk. So I think that's another thing for people listening to these. So many of these skills as an athlete relate to the skills that you're going to develop later as a person in your own life, because they all translate. But, one of the things Mike said was Drew Brees, the football player, was asking him, hey, how do you set goals? And he was talking to a bunch of football players out in Bradenton. And, did you learn? Did someone teach you? And he said, when I used to go grocery shopping, I realized if I walked into a Safeway and I had 8 things written down, I would go into Safeway and I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'd get right out. And then I noticed if I walked into that same Safeway a week later and had nothing written down, I'd be in there for 25 minutes. I'd find myself on aisle 7 going, why am I here staring at the Twinkies? And so I started to realize that if I had things written down, it would target my mind to focus on those things. So as a track athlete, I focused on keeping my head down, pumping my arms, exploding like a gun, and being a bullet. And I would tell myself those things so my arms would think about those. And so we really built our model going into football, baseball, basketball. Like you said, you had these 2 things, and then kind of taking those 2 motivational elements, but then breaking them down into the neutral statements. So like Russell goes into a game with 3 things on his mind. Great balance, right? Athletically, you got to stay balanced. Great fundamentals, and then being engaged. I'm not going to let somebody else run my career. I'm going to be at front. I'm going to be talking. I'm going to be engaged. I'm going to be actively involved. And then at the end of the game, we evaluate, psychologically, how are your fundamentals? How is your balance? Were you engaged? Were you running the show? Were you letting your coach dictate your emotions and your intensity, or were you doing that?
I knew if I play my game, it's going to be tough for my opponent. If I do the things that I need to do, it's going to be tough for my opponent. But obviously then when you get in the heat of the moment and there's a lot of distractions and stuff, you go back into thinking, oh, result, right? Because that's ultimately why you're there. Your goal is not to do necessarily to do all those things. You want the results. That's your ultimate goal, to win, right? Because it's not, I don't think that the football team is like, okay, you know what? We're just going to practice this year, these 3 things. We'll see how it goes. Their desire, maybe it's a desire.
I do agree, but in the programs I'm involved in, the way we measure it, we don't set outcome goals.
Really?
You would see nothing about winning or championships.
Okay.
And the reason is you can win in not do what you were supposed to do. You can win because your opponent did a lot of things wrong. We want to be able to measure. Did we drive our hands this way? Did we move this way? Did we have these penalties? Did we make these mistakes? Did we have these successes? Did we stop them here? And we have all these tangible measurements where we can say, all right, we did all those. They won, then they outplayed us, but we played our game. There's an outcome component to it. Obviously, you've got to win, but your mind can only think about one thing at a time, Vika. So the more it's focused on, did I go low to high? Did I do the things I needed to do? Was I engaged? Hey, in the long term, I'm going to win. Now, obviously, we are very practical. If you're a good player, you better play good or you won't play, right? Like, I mean, we speak the real language. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. So if you're at the places I'm at, if it's the 4th quarter, you better close that dude out, but we're focused on how you do it as opposed to closing them out.
I am so result focused that it messes with me a lot of times. That's where I have to retrain myself. And it's, I've been playing on tour for 16 years, 15 years, and I'm still kind of learning that.
But one thing I want to really reinforce is the inside thoughts, Vika, have nowhere near the power as the outside words. So don't worry as much about the inside thoughts. Like, in the world today, how could they not be all over the place? And I've been with people before championships and US Opens where they're like, you have that doubt, you have that worry, but you're not talking about it. You're not like, I don't know if I can beat her. As long as you just kind of keep that in, and then in your mind, you have that debate like you're talking about. Hey, you know what? Let's close this traffic. Let's calm down. I can do this. And you have that conversation. And then you don't let it come out loud. And then you kind of stay strong and you act as if, and I just, but I think the vast majority of people, Vika, if we want to have the conversation with people in Belarus, people in Guernsey, people in Los Angeles, with more people, we got to make it easier for them. And I think learning how to not watch this and to not listen to that and to not say this is the starting point. But I don't think anybody knows that's the starting point.
We are programmed, and I feel like, especially in US, it's like more money, more fame, more this. It's always more food. Like, it's so much that, like, less, and it's a great way of explaining. It's like sometimes you just have to shut up and do it.
Sometimes what made you one of the best players in the world is not what you did, but what you were willing not to do. What you didn't eat, who you didn't talk to, what you didn't watch, what you didn't consume. And we can always not do things. And I think if we start there, there's a great graduation speech that Matthew McConaughey did, and who would think Matthew McConaughey, but 25 years he's been acting. And he said the process of elimination is one of the most powerful things in the world. Once you learn who you're not, you get closer to figuring out who you are. And so, but I try to be simple just because I also try to impact more people.
What I want to know and learn and understand, and for people to understand, is the skill of recovery. Because I have suffered a really difficult, personal trauma. You've went through divorce. I had a little bit of a different situation with my custody battle, and that reshaped me. So what is your steps to recover from the trauma that you have endured already?
Well, I think for you, when you were, kind of going through your situation, whether custody was going to be in Belarus or Los Angeles County, and and then just that not knowing, right? And then, obviously something so important, somebody that's a part of you, somebody that's your child, and I think a divorce was really traumatic for me because, ours wasn't, infidelity, or, ours was literally just grew apart. And that was such a frustrating thing to have happen. And or Russell Wilson, throwing an interception on the 1 yard line in the Super Bowl in front of 124 million people, and then having the trauma of, people saying you failed, or you made this mistake, or you didn't live up to the hype, or because you made that mistake in a contract year, you lose millions of dollars. I think the best thing you can do, I'll just take an athletic example here. Russell makes this mistake and the Super Bowl is over. So you can't pretend it didn't happen. So what's the truth? You got to go to the truth, and you got to evaluate, why did this happen? Right? Why am I in this battle? What happened to my marriage? What's the circumstance? What happened in this game? What's the truth? And then I got to evaluate, and I got to own it. But then I got to realize, all right, what can I do next? I've lost my job. What can I do next? Where can I go to apply for, finances? Who can I talk to? What's my situation? What lawyers can I get to help me navigate custody? All those different types of things. So you get really neutral and very solution oriented. And I really think that philosophy of what can I do as a question mark, what can I do? Or what's versus an exclamation point. Like, what can I do?
Once you start this process, it's so invisible for you, right? Like you can't really notice that, especially if you're going out of a dark place, people going out of depression or something. You can't really see those steps. So I feel like sometimes people on the outside notice that before you do on kind of your personal journey. And I've had that experience just recently talking with my assistant, and I was sharing her, and I'm like, I'm doing all these things and I just don't feel like I'm progressing. I feel like I'm just staying in one place. And she says, Vika, like, if you would see yourself 2 months ago, it's a huge difference, but you just can't notice. And then there's this tipping point where you start to see that, okay, you know what, that's how I feel a little bit better. And I've noticed that the patterns, the habits are so important in starting them, even though you don't see the progress right away, is to the consistency and not kind of giving up, keep going and keep doing it is something so fascinating. So, at this stage in my career, like if we're going to talk about like professionally, I'm rediscovering who I am. So I'm not necessarily going back into the past, which is like something that you always ask, like, oh, what you played in 2012 and 2013, like, are you the same person? I'm like, I don't want to be the same person. Why would I want to be that same person that was 6-7 years ago, which I don't think even was that happy as maybe I am right now, sitting here talking to you and discovering my personal journey. So it's such a kind of fascinating thing to kind of get to that place and keep going. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, because as you said, like in these 2 hours, it's transformational. Like you really learn and you share. And I wish people had those type of conversations, shared those experiences with each other, rather than other, bullshit that's kind of going around. But I just want like people to understand that it doesn't matter where you are, right, in your journey. There's always something you can do, and it's going back to like, okay, what actions am I gonna take to do the things that will help me to move forward, to move to a direction where I kind of want to go.
It's fun to hear how excited you are about taking this next step. And I think the idea of neutral is, look, I'm accountable for whatever's happened in my life, good or bad. But who I am going forward is based on what I'm going to do next. That's going to define me. And if I'm Tiger Woods and I have all these gifts, but I don't do what you do to be a great golfer or a great human, I'm not going to succeed. But if I have those gifts and I do those things, then I will. Vika, like, nobody knows if positive thinking works or to some degree even neutral, but we know that negative thinking does, and it works negatively. So why would we say it? Why would we watch it? Why would we consume it? And so, like, to me, Russell and I always finish every text, the best is ahead. And I think that for you, like, getting a chance just to listen. Obviously, you're very successful. You've been successful. Neutral thinking, Vika, I guess one of my last points would be, is a pretty good place, I think, to get mentally right now, because so many things are changing so fast.
I wanted to ask you if you could maybe summarize in about 60 seconds what you learned maybe about me in our conversation.
I think very engaged, very introspective, very capable. I mean, I think you're, from how you look, how you present yourself, how you manage yourself, by far more than an athlete, very well-rounded, which is always fun to spend time with people, because let's be realistic, sometimes in the athletic world, we're not well-rounded. We're not diverse, very inquisitive. And it's so clear to me that so many exciting things are ahead for you. I think you play tennis as long as you can play. That's the way I think to do it. And I think you got a lot of game left. But I think what really jumps out at me is your research, your preparation, which I appreciate, particularly because I work in a field where nobody knows what the hell I do. So the fact that you did was great, and it made it easier for me. But I really believe that that people who are passionate about learning will inherit the earth. And that's what really jumped out at me about you. I want to make sure you get, we exchange information, because I think this is just the beginning of a good friendship and a good opportunity to mutually grow.
That would be fantastic, and thank you. So I'm gonna go to this little questionnaire. It's very short questions and very short answers. So what is your favorite word?
Wow.
I'm glad I stunned you. I'm glad I did.
Incredible.
Incredible. What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
What is one profession besides your own you would like to do?
A doctor.
What is one profession you would never want to do?
College professor.
That's funny. What do you like about people? What makes you excited about people? What do you like character-wise?
Fellowship, being together. I love the idea of community. You can't do that on your own. I love the idea of being with other people, and I miss that.
What kind of turns you off of people?
External arrogance. I love confidence, but external arrogance is a challenge for me.
And my last question is, if heaven exists and you would arrive at the pearly gates, what would you want God to tell you?
You put your best foot forward and did what you could to utilize the gifts I gave you. I think that would be, I don't think I could ask for more. And I think I got a long ways to go, Vika, before I would get that answer. But that would be incredible.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Well, that's a wrap. Trevor, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. We went way above what we had in mind, but it was worth every minute. I appreciate your vision. I appreciate your work you do. And as you said, I hope it's just the beginning of a great friendship. I wish you all the best of luck with your new project. I'll be watching, I'll be listening, I'll be learning.
Likewise.